Hello everyone and welcome to the webinar today. Sorry to be a few minutes late in getting going. Few housekeeping rules before we start. You're all in listen only mode. We don't have any slides today. It's a discussion between myself and my three guests. And you can ask questions during the webinar using the question or the chat feature. We may not be able to get to them during the webinar, but we'll take a note of all questions and follow up with you afterwards. We're also recording the webinar today as an episode of our podcast, Talking New Energy. If you don't know our podcast, we publish episodes weekly with guests who are working at the leading edge of the energy transition. So you can listen to our podcast on Spotify, iTunes, all the normal platforms, as well as via our website. So today I'm joined by three leaders from distribution network companies, typically known as DSOs in continental Europe and DNOs in the UK. We'll refer to them as DSOs today, just to make things easy. At Delta EE, we see that DSOs will be increasingly in the spotlight as the energy transition gathers pace and energy becomes more decentralized and more electrified. No longer, I think, will DSOs be the slow-moving, or dare I say it, slightly dull parts of the energy system. Apologies to all DSOs who are listening. But the jobs that DSOs are having to do are changing and becoming harder and harder, connecting renewable energy in ever-increasing numbers, accommodating and facilitating electrification, integrating with other parts of the energy system and other energy vectors, all while coping with more extreme weather events. Luckily, they have more tools to do these jobs, with these tools typically enabled by the rise of software, the Internet of Things, tidal waves of data, and artificial intelligence, machine learning, and more. So I think really exciting times to be part of the DSO or working with DSOs. And if you're listening today and you've not worked with DSOs in the past, I think there's a good chance you'll have more and more interactions with them in the future, whether you're an electricity retailer, in the flexibility sector, or in the electrification or distributed renewables value chains. So that makes me delighted to host a discussion today between three of Europe's leading DSOs. And today we've got guests from Enel in Italy, Alliander from the Netherlands, and UK Power Networks, whose name gives their location away. So let's say hello to my guests. First of all, Viviana Vito from Enel. Hello, Viviana.
Hi, nice to stay here with you today.
And you're very welcome. Viviana, can you just tell our guests briefly what your role is at Enel?
Yes, my name is Viviana Vito, and I've been in the energy sector since a long while, actually more than 22 years. And currently, I have the role and the possibility to be the head of market strategy and regulatory analysis within the Global Infrastructure and Network. This is the division that's in Enel take care, let's say, of all the distribution company all over the world.
Okay, and that's a lot more than just Italy, isn't it? Your distribution companies.
No, yes.
How many countries altogether?
As distributors, we have 8 countries. We are in Italy, Spain, Romania, and Europe, and abroad in Latin America, in all the main megalopoli of Latin America. So 5 countries on top.
Great. Okay, we'll come back to you shortly. My second guest is Suleiman Ali from UK Power Networks. Hello, Sul.
Hi, good afternoon.
Now, unfortunately, Sul, we can't see you, but the video connection is not working, but we can hear you fine. So, Sul, likewise, can you just tell us a bit about your role at UK Power Networks?
Sure. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm the Director of Strategy and Customer Service at UK Power Networks. So I look after all of our customer-facing operations, our business strategy, and I also look after regulation, technology, and innovation.
Great, thanks very much. So look forward to hearing from you shortly. Our third guest is hopefully sorting out his technical challenges in joining the webinar. It's Dan Schutt, who's CTO at Alliander in the Netherlands. So we'll hear from Dan shortly. But what I've asked my guests to do is to talk about their top 3 opportunities or challenges as the from a DSO perspective, as the energy transition gathers pace. Opportunities or challenges? Well, because one person's opportunity is one person's challenge is another person's opportunity, and maybe it depends a bit whether you're as we say in English, a glass half empty person or a glass half full person. So I'll ask each of my guests to go through their top 3 opportunities or challenges in reverse order. So third biggest, second biggest, and then the biggest. And then we'll have a discussion around some of the themes, the differences in what my guests think. So Viviana, let's go with you to begin with. Do you want to go through your 3, 2, 1 in terms of your opportunities and challenges?
Now, as you were mentioning, the DSO now is DNO is changing their role, and it's more and more crucial and essential in the energy transition. So the challenges and opportunity are different angle of the same point that you need to tackle as operator. But if I need to put as a priority, I think that the first one that I mentioned, that is the third one that actually, in my opinion, is more essential, is to being innovative and resilient. Meaning resilience that is not just being resilient to climate change condition, but to market disruption condition, meaning that the situation by which the DSO will find themselves in managing different prosumers, and all the new actors will create new dynamics to manage the network. And this means putting together all the tools in terms of innovation, from the automation in different layers. So we consider smart meter essential, but any other capability of the DSO to have remote control, to have sensors, IoT, going to artificial intelligence use in order to better profile the use of the network on TIs, meaning this challenge was also opportunity. The second one is to be participatory. So we need to do a platform and create a way that all the other players can play together with the network. And this means design a role of a flexible operator, of a system operator, then can allow all the counterparts to participate in an open way and arriving to the customer. And the third one, that in my opinion is the first one in terms of importance, is to do all of that being sustainable. So to participate to the gain, to arrive to decarbonization, an objective for less CO2 and other emission, meaning not just having the hosting capacity for the renewable or the electric mobility, possibly coming from green energy that we have on our network, but being also in the asset itself CO2 absorber. So having the capability to design processes and services in order that everything is optimized to do the best for creating an environment that is much participative to the objective of reducing emission.
Okay, Viviana, I think I'm fascinated by your answers. If I just summarize them, so third one was being innovative and resilient. The second one being participatory, so this new role, DSO role as an orchestrator. And number one, being sustainable, which isn't just about your own operations, but sustainable in your approach, so involving the entire energy ecosystem. And the reason I think these are really interesting ways to frame them are it's as much about your mindset in a way as technically what you're doing. Is that how you're thinking about how your mindset is in approaching networks?
Yeah, it's a mindset, but with an engineering approach that should remain. This means that when you have to design, for example, something in your network, you need since the very beginning to think to the value that this design in terms of specific appliance or specific processes should bring also in terms of KPI for the ambition of emission and all the other ambition in terms of sustainability. So I give an example that is very practical one, but it's not the only one that we have in our company. It is about smart meter. We tend to design smart meters since the very beginning in order they can absorb CO2, meaning the asset itself needs to be, for example, done in a circular economy with the plastic reused from out of a meter or from other plastic reutilization. And also the entire design of the processes to do the smart meter should be from the very starting points in that direction. So all the value chain, all the supply chain, all the logistics. So this can really create value because the opportunity we have as distributor, they are very distributor, local, that's very incredible volume of things that we produce, we use for our network. And this means a good capability to escalate. So a small innovation design for value, for an asset, for a processes, if it's replicated, can bring value in all the network and also for our peers, because we have not in competition. So we can bring the same topology of processes elsewhere. We don't need to stick in our area because we have only for ourselves this deployment and innovation only for us. We can share with peers.
Yeah. Okay, great example. Thanks for bringing that to life. We'll come back and discuss some of these points once we've heard from Sul and Dan. Sul, over to you now. So your top three in reverse order. So third, second, and then first.
Okay, sure. So hi, good afternoon, everyone. So
nice that we can see you now. Nice that we can see you now as well. That always makes things easy.
I managed to get the firewall adjusted, which is nice when you run technology. Okay, so kind of in reverse order, I would say number one, electric vehicles. So in the UK, transport accounts for about a third of greenhouse gas emissions. And the big challenge that we see here is how do we scale up the provision of EV public charging to tackle EV inequality and avoid some of the issues we've seen in things like broadband, where rural communities, or we have sort of charging deserts that appear where it's not viable for market-based approaches to deliver the infrastructure that's needed, and the charge points particularly. So the challenge us is what role should DNOs play, working with market participants, national level government, to ensure that everybody can benefit from the decarbonisation of transport, and that we don't have or we don't exacerbate inequality in society. The second one is around energy efficiency. So in order to decarbonise heat, you need to have an energy efficiency rating in the UK, a minimum energy efficiency rating C. We have lots of properties that are nowhere close to that, and therefore, if we're going to decarbonise heat, how are we going to commercialise energy efficiency to tackle the issues that we have in our legacy housing stock, and what role should DSOs or DNOs play in that? Because effective energy efficiency, one could see it as like a flexibility service in that it reduces peak demand and overall demand. So how should DNOs, DSOs be producing products and services that effectively help commercialise energy efficiency at scale? And then the third one, probably most important, is what I call whole systems and the enabling incentives. There was a recent report that was done by Imperial College London and the Carbon Trust, and those guys and girls identified something like £17 billion per annum by 2050 from having smarter, more flexible energy networks. And when you look at that business case, what it is basically a cost avoidance. It's about saying, well, if you have much smarter, flexible energy networks and consumers that are effectively choosing to consume when it's cheaper and greener to do so, you can avoid building new generation plants, new nukes, new renewables that you don't need, right? Because actually you're consuming in a more efficient way. So the question then is, okay, how do you remunerate network companies, DSOs, market participants that are pivotal to unlock that system value? Because it's a cost avoidance. So how do you create the right incentives and frameworks to make sure that we all benefit from that £17 billion of savings per annum? That is a big strategic issue.
Thanks, Saul. So summarising, in third place, was the EV public charging provision, particularly where the market won't deliver that public charging infrastructure. What role can a DSO play in that? Second was energy efficiency linked to decarbonising heat. How can DSOs help to support, incentivize, or facilitate energy efficiency? And number one, whole system incentives. So getting a more flexible energy system. What role can a network company play? How should you be remunerated? So what I think is interesting, or my takeaway from this, is all three of those areas go out with of what traditionally a DNO or a DSO would think about its networks and its assets. So all of those stray onto the other side of the meter, as it is often called. So how do you see that as a pivotal change or new role in your job as a DSO, that you've traditionally focused on your assets, your transformers, your cables? In the future, you're going to be much more involved with customers' assets.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. But I don't think that will be, certainly not in the UK, directly involved with end consumers. As an example, we'll probably work through intermediaries like aggregators or energy suppliers who effectively have the end relationship with the customer. But effectively, from a customer's point of view, if they are presented with compelling propositions that effectively say we can lower your energy bill if you can consume when it's cheaper and greener to do so, the network companies should be able to reduce their reinforcement investments, and pass on some of that value to customers. And network companies should be incentivized to do that. So yes, definitely, we need to be thinking about collaboration and propositions for end consumers, end customers, and what our role will be to make those products and services, new propositions viable.
Thanks, Phil. We'll come back and discuss some of that in a bit more detail shortly. Now, we're still waiting for Dan Schutt. Unfortunately, I understand that Alliander Firewall is proving very effective, and meaning he's got a challenge in joining the GoToMeeting software that we're using. So like you discover with your camera and getting around your firewall, DSOs are certainly quite secure in the networks at the moment in certain ways. Luckily, I've got Dan's top 3 challenges, which I can share with you. Hopefully, Dan will be able to join us for the discussion. So his third place challenge was digital transformation of the energy system. So embracing digitalization and better utilization. His second challenge was scaling operational output. So realizing more grid reinforcements more quickly. And his first challenge was truly utilizing flexibility, or influencing behaviors for an effective and efficient energy system. So some similar themes there: digitalization, scaling operational output, which is, I think, slightly different, Saul, from yours and Viviana's, and then truly utilizing flexibility, I think echoed in Viviana, Saul, both of your points. And interestingly, talking with Alliander, I know when they've got a lot of grid congestion, like both of you probably have, in connecting renewables to their networks. And it's interesting to hear the culture that when they can't connect a new PV farm, for example, or an application for a PV farm, their employees, it really hurts them, because their employees really want to connect renewables. They want to be part of the energy transition. They want to be enabling it. And I think that was an interesting observation for me on that culture, that they're desperate to facilitate the energy transition, and it hurts them when they act as when they can't do that. So Viviana and Saul, I'm interested in your observations on each other's priorities. Was there anything that surprised you on each other's points, or anything that was different to how you think about things? Or would you say you agree completely with each other's points, they're just expressed in a different way?
I think that the points are all very similar, and it's just a question of expressing it with different angle in the end. But and this is why the opportunity again in between the player of these parts of the value chain, the DSO, DNO, whatever, is peculiar, because the capability that we can have in confronting ourselves on the technical points can arrive really in a very a good level in terms of transparency. So we can really share how to do, and this is independent from the organizational type of choice that the company can have. But when you put two people on the technical side to understand how to facilitate the connection, in the end is really a fruitful conversation. And I've experimented sometimes table of discussion facilitating people from different countries and different players was very useful. And this is again the idea how DSO can open the participation with others. First of all, with other peers. I could mention that we launched before the summer this Flexibility Lab initiative that is exactly the tentative we're doing to creating a place where we can exchange technical tools and technical instruments to plan how the network should participate with the system on the flexibility markets, and open to players that can bring services for this market in futures, but also peers that can experiment the trial on these labs. So I think this is a way to do it, to open technology, to open innovation, and to have a place where we can share it. So open to everyone to our Flexibility Labs initiative that are in Italy and Spain, but also can bring experience from other countries.
Okay, so physics is the same from network to network. The regulation may differ, the precise market structure may differ, but the engineering and the physics are common. So what about yourself in terms of the what you've heard from Viviana and the priorities that are outlined from Dan at Alliander?
No, they resonate with me. I think we've just taken slightly different perspectives on the same sort of challenges. I've come at it from okay, as a country, we need to hit net zero by 2050. It's heat transport, and we need to do it cheaply. So how do we go about doing that? What our role is? But in order for us to be able to achieve those things, the things that Viviana pointed out are really key. So the first one around innovation and how we need to look at the problems and solutions in a different way. So that needs to pervade every aspect of our business. Because we're not going to achieve net zero if we just kind of think about the solutions in the way that we've always thought about them. So an example would be, where we see huge connection volumes coming in, I don't think it's acceptable for network companies to say, we don't have any capacity, you can't connect. That would be a failure. Our job is to make sure that people can connect. And therefore, we for example, have thought about things like timed connections, flexible connections, where, an example would be in London, bus operators that are on really tight timescales, never had to work with the electricity sector at scale. They don't know what the lead times are. They've said, we need to get some bus garages online ASAP. Now, we can't say to them, oh, sorry, you're going to have to wait 24 months for reinforcement. We've got a timed connection. We looked at their demand profile, allowed them to connect, 75% cheaper, and actually it's 12 months off the time frame, bang. Now, what we need to be able to do is to think about those types of solutions in everything that we do. And I think the other point that Viviana raised was around sort of the participatory approach. And I think that really resonates with me, because we have to now work with sectors that, quite frankly, have not had to give a damn about the electricity. It's just been a given. So fleet operators, they don't really know anything about electricity as it pertains to EV charging, and we don't know much about them. And therefore, coming up with new products and services requires us to change the way in which we operate. And I think there's lots we can learn from the competitive market in terms of how competitive businesses, they have to fight for their revenue, go about understanding customer segment needs and how they go about developing propositions for those needs.
What do you both think about the change of mindset needed for that? Viviana, you framed your three challenges very much around mindset driving the right engineering approach. So what you've described is different from where a network company was 10 years ago, for example. So given how urgent, well, how quickly the change is coming to the energy sector now, and how urgent the challenge is, how hard is it to drive that mindset that you're talking about, Sil, and Viviana, that you outlined in your response to the top 3 opportunities?
It's clear that you need to have a driver, and I think that's probably since a little bit more than 10 years we have on the objective and pillars. This is why when you need to be sustainable, and as a company, as a group, you have sustainable bonds, then you need to bring that also in, not only on the renewable side, but on the component of the value chain, because you want to be sustainable in a wider, let's say, scope. And this is coming from the top. Then from the bottom-up approach, this is why you need to enter into stimulating any type of product or service in that direction. And the way we are trying to do that is through transformational process into platform, let's say, modality. This is to combine the different model and solution using of data in order to be very pervasive, not just to have a silos approach, but to have a more holistic, but not just, but in a real modality. For example, the challenges of data, I think, is an incredible opportunity, because you need to imagine an incredible amount of data that you can reach thousands of billion per day of data from meter, for example. No? You need to have sensor, and you have these thousands of sensors, and then you need to transform this into opportunity. How you can really valorize these inputs into giving to solution for your business for your objective, and to be more resilient, to respond much better in terms of the features you need to have and the standard, let's say, compromise you have for your concession or license to be reliable, because in the very end it's about that. You need to be reliable. And use of electricity is so increasing in terms of also other sectors, electric mobility. We have experimented through this pandemic how for telecom operator is more essential electricity, and they knew, let's say, but they realized how much is it probably, and also all the other sector, because to stay in the data flow you need electricity, and otherwise you cannot do everything. So this is so crucial and so spread in all the systems, also at business sector level, that you need to use these challenges as an opportunity also to cooperate. Example, sharing infrastructure with telecom operator, things that we already do, but you need to do much better. Sharing data with other sector in order to have this bunch of data that could be, for the extension is possible with all the regulation, GPR, but you can use data for vegetation to provide to your network a better use for maintenance, but you can have vegetation also for the administration of a city. So this is the platform. It's not just interconnection in between tools of technical, but also capability of having these shared.
Viviana, I've seen from Enel, you've been very successful with NLX, for example, your services business, not the networks part of Enel, but other parts of Enel. And talking with people in NLX and other parts of Enel, it's really stemmed from leadership from the top. You can see and feel how that leadership flows down through NLX and different parts of Enel. Is that the same in the networks parts of your business? Are you having to push this down from above, or is it bubbling up from below, or is it a bit of both?
It's a bit of both, but I think that really we changed the sense of urgency in a very different manner. For years, the distribution business has been considered, even in a company like Enel, sort of latest part of the everywhere actually, but sort of supply, security of supply, different business diversification. Then we have this poor guy working on a network that are there, technical people, engineer, forget about that. They need just to do connection on the renewable. But now really this is changing. You will hear more and more our group CEO, Rajesh, speaking about network, and also the responsible or our division is Antonello Camiteca, coming from the green electricity with a very enthusiastic approach and very different drivers, and with a little bit of revolution in terms of a managerial approach. But I think this has been changing. And I can tell that because I'm a person that is in the company since really too many years, probably. But I on all the value chain of the company, so renewable, generation, etc. Also in Enel, I've been 2 years there. But I think that now the way we do is really a new way.
It's really changing.
Yeah, really changing. Yeah.
So how about UK Power Networks and changing the mindset and that innovative approach and being open to new approaches?
Yeah, I think it's not about throwing the baby out the bathwater. There are mindsets and ways of doing things that are still valid. You know, we are traditionally a risk-averse culture. We like to measure things. We like to know the impact of a change before we go make the change, because obviously keeping the lights on is our #1 priority. So I think those strong engineering domain expertise and mindsets will remain. But I think what we need to do is supplement them with more entrepreneurship, a curiosity around data, technology skills that we haven't really needed in the past, but we will need in the future around machine learning, AI. And I think it's about then combining both of those two things together to solve specific problems, and actually taking a more consumer-led approach. Like in the past, where network companies have not had the end relationship with customers. I mean, I remember 20 years ago talking to utility executives, and they would say, "We don't have customers; we have meter points." You know, and in the UK, and look how much
or they have one customer, and that's a regulator.
Yeah, that's right. And you know, and you look at now, and you think, well, how retrograde a perspective was that? You know, now you look in the UK, and all of the DSOs are fighting to be #1 in customer service. They're measuring everything daily. You know, they're delivering as an industry over 9 out of 10 customer service scores, and the culture's changed massively. And I think what we need to do is to then now kind of look at the yardstick and say, right, we can't compare ourselves to other regulated businesses. We need to compare ourselves to businesses operate in a competitive market, and what would they do in terms of understanding future customer needs, and how do they get their products and services ready for that future market. So I think it's not about replacing the mindsets and skills. It's about supplementing them with these new things that we need, given the changing energy system.
And I guess there's no one magic button to press to get that going. That again starts with leadership, that flows from the top. It's culture, it's a change of mindset that takes time to develop.
I think it starts with purpose more than anything. You know, what is the purpose of your company? And I think if that's not clear, then you see that in organisations that just keep running around like just chickens from one crisis to another. I think you've got to be clear as a company. What is your purpose? How do you measure that purpose? What ambitions are you setting on that purpose? And then I think it gives clarity to everyone in the organisation about what is their role in achieving those objectives. Are their measures aligned with the organisational measures, if you want to call it that? And I think that's what helps. If you don't have that, how does anyone know what's important and what their role is in delivering what's important?
Yeah, it's a lesson for everyone in terms of purpose, whatever organisation you work in. And has that purpose changed still? You know, I'm thinking of how someone in a DSO might have answered that question 10 years ago. The purpose might have been to minimize the cost of maintaining assets or to focus on reliability. So how do you articulate that purpose in your company? And Viviana, interested in how you'd articulate that in the networks part of your company.
Okay, I mean, so when we were formed in 2010 as UK Power Networks, we had 3 core objectives that we set at an organisational level, which is to be an employer of choice, a respected corporate citizen, and to be sustainably cost efficient. And what we did as an organisation, we basically set very clear KPIs, not a list of 100. We actually managed this business at that level, and about sort of less than a dozen KPIs. So we looked at, for example, lost time injuries. We looked at employee engagement. We looked at things like our reliability performance, our customer service scores, our stakeholder engagement scores, and then we looked at how we are performing against the regulatory contract that has been set by Ofgem as it pertains to costs. Because in a commercial business, if you earn £100 and your budget is £50, you don't go and say, oh, well, that's fine, I'll just keep spending 50. In a commercial enterprise, you will seek to spend 40 because you get more profit. So how do we get that same commercial tension in our business as it pertains to the regulatory contract, i.e. drive more and more efficiency? So we set those objectives, and they've done us well for the last 10 years, 11 years. We're top on just about every measure that we've set, whether it's safety, reliability, service.
Have you changed them?
No, they've evolved. They have evolved. We haven't changed them. We haven't changed the measures that were there. We've evolved them, right? So, for example, 10 years ago, we never had anything on diversity and inclusiveness, right? But we have. We've now said that we're going to benchmark ourselves and be amongst the best in the UK. We never had any measures on effectively how we're driving and facilitating competition. We never had any measures on gender parity and some of those other things. So we have we've evolved and adapted and added new measures as the society and the environment around us has changed. Right. Most recently, we're adding a fourth pillar to our vision, right, which is how are we going to facilitate net zero for our communities. And we're adding that explicitly at the top level, equivalent to being an employer of choice, a respected corporate citizen, and sustainably cost efficient. So underneath that pillar, we're going to add some specific measures. How are we supporting our employees to decarbonise their lifestyles? How are we supporting the regions to decarbonise within the areas that we cover? How are we supporting and driving competition and greater flexibility to deliver net zero at the lowest cost? So we're changing that plank of our vision, and we're adding a fourth pillar with clear objectives and targets. And we're actually establishing a DSO, an independent and separable DSO from the DNO, with specific targets and an objective to drive competition in every part of the business, which will be under the same ownership group, but will be very distinct and separate in terms of it will have its own advisory board, its own metrics, and measures of success, which will report separately to the regulator and stakeholders.
Okay, that's fascinating to hear how you articulate that sense of purpose, and how that's evolved. Viviana, from Enel's perspective, sense of purpose, what shone through to me in the way you answered those questions was talking about things like the UN Sustainable Development Goals as part of your purpose. So, yeah, how widespread is that through your networks businesses in 8 different countries? Are you trying to develop this sort of common sense of purpose across all your countries?
Yeah, I think that this was partially also was mentioned earlier. The point is when you create a purpose that can be shareable also for the people that participate to contribute in terms of employee, this can for sure give you the capability to not only drive the change, but to make it happen, because otherwise you drive the change from the top and then it will not happen because people feel not comfortable for the purpose. So being and giving to the business sustainability goals and trying to, for all the country, to align it in as we mentioned before, in processes and services, this creates 2 opportunities. The first one is to probably also having these economics that you were referring before in a good shape, because you create standard of quality, standard of services, then create synergy in the business and in all the value chain of your business. Being with a presence in 8 countries, you can imagine that you standardize product and services can facilitate this type of economic of scale within the different activity that you have to do. And on the other side, you create also KPI to give your purpose, no? And to track exactly emission and to accompany each decision in terms of investment, also with this type of evaluation. And track it and measure it and be also accountable for that I think this that creates value for the entire company, because in the end, being accountable on that also creates a major interest from investors. Then can look to the sector not just with a profitable bond, because we have the certain level of HCC or certain level of regulated profit, but you are more in line with the objective of sustainability than also investor can have. So I think it's really a value. I think really that creating value on this type of purpose is creating economic value. It's automatic.
It's not an either or, they support each other.
Yeah. Then you have the regulator that's you need to have on board on that, because they need to track this type of value also in your revenue stream somehow.
Well, that's my last question I want to come to now for both of you, which is speed and pace. I said at the beginning of the discussion, the energy transition is gathering pace, and I think if you think of a hockey stick shaped curve, I think we're still on the shallow part of the curve. I think some people think a lot has changed, but I think the speed and pace of change in the energy sector is going to accelerate. So, and our 2030 carbon targets are really challenging. Yet this is energy sector's conservative sector. The network sector is probably the more conservative part of the sector, rightly risk averse, very focused on keeping the lights on, and it's very regulated, and regulators move at a certain pace, sometimes fast, but often not as fast as we might want. So how do we reconcile the urgency, the heavy regulation in the sector, and the naturally risk-averse mindset of many people in the sector? Are they contradictory? How do each of you feel about reconciling those and moving at a fast enough pace? So maybe starting with you, and then Viviana.
Excuse me. Let me have a drink of water. I would say, look, there's always trade-offs between all of these things. So, yes, we need to deliver at pace, and do we think that we're going fast enough? Probably not, I would say. But if you look at the track record, so if you take, for example, in the UK market, just look at how we decarbonised power over the last 10 years. And that has exceeded a lot of expectations, particularly if you look at, for example, solar distributed generation. And if you look at the recipe of how that was successful, you had very clear government policy and targets, back to subsidies. You had network companies that were looking at what their customer needs were. And you had basically a lot of competition. So it wasn't just the network companies delivering the capacity. You had a buoyant independent connections provider market, etc. So there was a plethora of wealth of talent that you could rely on to actually make those connections. I think we need to recreate that same recipe for success as it pertains to transport and heat, if we're going to achieve the next 10 years and 20 years worth of targets. So I'm not worried about that, actually. I just think that it's more about just being focused on setting targets that are achievable within a shorter time frame. So part of the problem that we find is that if you talk about 2050, it's kind of like, well, actually, who's going to be here? A lot of the people that are making decisions today are not going to be around in 2050. So I think what we need to do is change our mindset, take like a COVID emergency mindset that says we must do something. Okay, what do we need to do over the next 5 years in terms of carbon reductions? Right, how do we go about combining policy, incentives, and competition and networks to drive the outcomes we want? That's what we need to do. So I'm not worried about it. I think we should be confident about what we've achieved today. We just now need to amp it up a little bit.
Just to have the right focus, a right sense of urgency.
That's it. Yeah, exactly. It's going to be harder, no question, because decarbonisation over the next decade, in the next 20 years, is going to require behaviour change and action at a consumer level, which the last 10 years, quite frankly, has been invisible to most consumers. So I think that's the dynamic that's changing. that we need to be on top of and decide how we're going to tackle that, because it impacts all of us as citizens, as well as people that work in the utility sector.
Thanks, Saul. Viviana, to finish, how do you see the urgency and the pace?
No, the urgency is there. Also, I think that the capability of this sector is huge. So in the end, normally the way that, because we have been a long trial of experience, I'm not speaking like Enel, but in general, DSO are very consistent in terms of their capacity to react to urgency, to disruption, because they are, in the very end, the ultimate point of contact where a problem is there in terms of services. So I really believe that the capability of this sector is huge, and the potential of escalating in terms of solution is incredible. So the only point is to have regulator on board in being most possible transparent, in let them understanding how it works. I believe a lot on sandbox regulatory experiment that can bring value in large-scale demonstration to demonstrate the potential of having a distributor directly in contact with the service provider in terms of flexibility, and how this can capture the value of flexibility in total, not partially, because we are so near the endpoints that you can capture this value in a broader way more than other players in the market. This is why we need markets local combined with the not local market, but local to capture all these potentiality of flexible mechanism. And so I think that this factory is ready. In some part of the continent, not everywhere, there could be peers that you need to bring on board with the experience and sharing experience. And this is possible to be done. So this opportunity should we not be lucid, and then also for continent where there could be a leapfrog. I believe I've been engaged for a long time in big power plants. Enough, this model is not working anymore. It's more justified a very local market with a local producer and good distribution grids more than a transnational network. Sorry, but it's like that. Yeah. The reality is changing, and the time horizon to decide on investment should be short, not could be long, so long.
Well, I'm pleased to hear how you both answer that question, because I think the speed of change will increase. But if you look at what distribution networks have achieved over the last decade, as you said, Saul, in one of your comments, things have changed a lot. And if society as a whole and your employees are passionate about what they're doing, wanting to connect more renewables, wanting to enable electrification, then I think the ingenuity, the mindset of engineers has shown that they can rise to challenges like this. So I think it's a hugely exciting area. I think distribution networks will be more and more in the spotlight. I think it's going to be a really exciting area to be working in. And importantly, I think the sharing of best practice, Viviana, you alluded to the fact that different countries are maybe moving at slightly different paces, but there's so much learning from one country to another country, and even from within country, that I think the answers are there or will be created. And then one of the challenges of the sector is to work together to share those, support each other in playing their bit in the next years. So time's got the better of us. I think we'll leave the discussion there. Lots more we could talk about, but Viviana and Saul, thank you so much for your time, for thinking about your top 3 challenges, for the discussion today. I'm sure everyone listening to the webinar would have found that fascinating, and everyone who listens to the podcast will really enjoy the discussion as well. Thanks, Viviana.
Thank you to you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Saul.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
Apologies to the audience we couldn't hear Dan. We'll find a way to maybe capture his views and share them as well. Thanks a lot, both. Thanks everyone for listening, and speak to you soon. Goodbye.